The other story that we wanted to talk about is this new Facebook decision. This is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. Let's put it up there on the screen, which is that Facebook has decided that they're going to uphold Trump's ban, but he can maybe come back in 2023. I think this is just the most ludicrous thing. Either ban him or don't. I mean, at the certain point, this is all becoming ridiculous. They said it will look to experts to decide whether the risk to public safety has receded. Which experts? Are they the nut jobs who screwed up? Yeah, I'm the expert, which is that let people generally say what they want. And look, you know, I don't think it's a secret. I'm a huge Trump fan, okay? And I think he probably did do a lot of damage on January 6th.
Yeah.
All of that being said, this is a farce, which is that take Trump out of it and take a look at this from a pure power perspective. It is ludicrous to have a fake oversight board providing fake recommendations to a fake transparent company. Who's in charge here? It's Zuckerberg. He's the only one who makes the decision. According to his own stock structure, what do I say all the time? Follow the money. He controls the company. He has a majority stake whenever it comes to majority shareholder power. So this one person is the person who's deciding whether the president is going to be here till 2021 or 2021 till 2023. And I think this really scary part is the Trump campaign, or the former campaign, potential campaign, has even said they view the Facebook decision as their ability in order to run again. So, look, I mean, I don't particularly want Trump to run again, but it's not my place. It's up to the American people, and it's certainly not up to Mark Zuckerberg.
That is the hard thing to separate. It's it's actually really nice that Trump's
nice
not on these platforms. Like on a day-to-day basis, the fact that, and it has worked. He just took his like crappy blog site thing down because no one was going to it. No one was reading it. The media wasn't covering it. That was apparently his big thing, was the fact that it wasn't what he was putting up on this blog site was not getting covered by the media. And so they gave up on that thing. So it has actually really worked to not have him on these platforms. But yeah, I read the corporate speak memo that Facebook put out about their decision to ban him for at least 2 years. And it was all like, oh, this shows that we're accountable, and this shows we're really listening to the board, et cetera, et cetera. But you know, one of the really basic things that they don't explain is what exactly did he say on your platform that justified this ban?
That's right.
Because the sense that I get is that this is much more about the totality of his actions than whether he actually violated their specific terms of service. So, okay, if you're in the business now of judging like the totality of a person and their actions in terms of whether they can have access to your platform, like, that's a whole other situation that you're putting yourself into.
That's called democracy. That's democracy. Only America gets to decide the totality of the president's actions and whether they constitute something where he should be booted. Well, and we did that.
And here's the thing, is like, I actually, and I, to be honest with you, I don't know what he said on Facebook to know whether
I think it was the same video. It was the same video he posted to Twitter where he's like, we love you, or whatever.
So I could actually be persuaded that a short-term ban could make sense if this sort of rule is being applied consistently to all political candidates, to all people, or if, I don't know if political candidates should have a separate category, to all world leaders, but it's very clearly not any sort of consistent standard or pattern, and none of those decision points are laid out. And then, I mean, the bottom line is always this, like, no matter whether this was the right or wrong decision, this ban or this length of time, et cetera, the bottom line is that a single person should not have so much incredible control over our political system. And so, yeah, you've basically vested in Mark Zuckerberg the ability to determine which political candidates are going to be viable and which are not. And that is an outrageous state of affairs, because Facebook, you know, we don't pay as much attention to it, and it doesn't get as much elite media attention at all. Twitter's basically the only thing that exists for elite media, and I fall into that trap as well. Of only looking at Twitter, I don't even know how to log on to Facebook anymore. But Facebook, the Trump team says, was the most critical social media network for their success. They invested tons in Facebook They were pushing tons of messaging there. So this was absolutely critical. And the fact that you have one guy who can just say like, no, and shut off that spigot is crazy.
No, I think that's exactly what it is, which is that at the end of the day, the arbitrariness of this all is not acceptable in a democracy. And actually, before he left, Ajit Pai actually proposed something, or was working on something, which I thought was very important, which is that the Section 230 debate gets very complicated very quickly about who's liable, et cetera. But it would be an amendment. And what it would do is it would force transparency of moderation. And what that means is that companies would have to publicly say exactly when and where they're going to remove something or not. As you said, Facebook should be required to point to the exact post, time, date, and stamp. They have all that data, I think we all know that, and say, this is the reason, this post right here, why Trump is being taken off.
This is what our terms of service say. These are other examples where he applied it in a similar way.
And remember Twitter and then their arbitrary ban of the Hunter Biden? That was insane. That was completely insane. You are not allowed to censor a private news organization. If they're libeling Hunter Biden, Hunter is welcome to sue them. Oh, and guess what? He hasn't. You know why? Because every single one of those emails are true, and every single one of those stories are true. And what that means to me is that the arbitrary position of all of this moderation is what has to be slayed more than anything. Like, we have to create a situation, and this is totally reasonable, which is we're not nationalizing Google or Facebook. We're saying, hey guys, if you're going to take stuff off, which I don't think anyone wants to live in a 100% unmoderated internet, right? That's like child porn and death threats and suicide and all that. We don't want to live in that world. We're just going to say, hey, you got to publish your standards. You got to come forward and you got to say to us, this is exactly when, where, how that we decide that we're going to take something off or we're going to put something on. Okay. And this is a democratic thing. We can make this and write this into law. This is what Congress is supposed to be. What we talked about earlier, which is that who is actually asking the questions of the 21st century? No one. Every time these goddamn tech companies get launched before Congress, what do we see? Some Republican who's like, hey, why does my iPhone email send to the... I kid you not. I saw this guy ask why his campaign emails go to the promotions folder on Gmail. He asked that to the CEO of Google. The CEO of Google. And Sundar Pichai was like, I'll look into that for you. I'm like, what are you doing? You're literally destroying my brain. I'm dumber for having watched you. And then the same thing whenever Facebook. Remember that embarrassing Facebook hearing? They were like, Mr. Zuckerberg, how do you make money? And he was like, ads, Senator. And then one of them asked him why something had been taken down. And Zuck goes, I believe you're referring to Twitter. So I'll leave that to my colleague, Mr. Dorsey. It is pathetic the way that these people are unable to grasp what's happening.
Very few
maybe 5
are actually serious. And Republicans, for all their talk of like, oh, big tech censorship, et cetera, et cetera, they have no interest in actually curtailing the power, having like real solutions to any of these problems. And I mean, I think platforms as large and as significant as Facebook is to just the basic workings of our democracy at this point, I do think they should be regulated like public utilities. Like, this is beyond what we should have in the hands of one individual or a publicly traded company. This is really, really essential to just the basic functioning of our country and our democracy. And so, you can't have someone who has so much power over which candidate can and can't run and can't have a shot at success. Do you actually think that that's true, that whether he's back on Facebook is going to determine whether Trump is going to run?
I actually do, because they need it. I don't think people can truly understand the sheer amount of cash and how important it is. Also, ask any of your boomer relatives. Boomers love Facebook. I don't really get it. They're getting their news from Facebook. They love sharing stuff on Facebook. They really enjoy like sharing stuff around, creating Facebook. This is a very boomer phenomenon. It's something I truly actually don't understand. But I know that they use it, and they use it a lot. And so that is the base. I mean, that is where Trump, his true power is in. Go ahead.
We also know that since he's been off these platforms, like, everything Trump has plummeted.
That's right. I mean, the Google search traffic on him.
The cable news segments, the number of mentions on Twitter. The Google search traffic.
That's the biggest indicator.
Went down to levels from before he even ran for president. So, and then, like I said before, the fact that he had to take his like shitty blog post thing down because just no one was looking at. Remember, we looked at those numbers and all of his posts together had like a few 100,000 engagements, which is like what we get in one segment. You know, I mean, it really is like, it was a pathetic number of level of engagement. Media wasn't covering it, et cetera. So yeah, I think if he remains banned on these platforms, it will be very difficult for him to be able to run. Now, look, if he did run, even without being on Facebook, would he win the GOP nomination?
Yeah, zero question. Right.
And then are you really going to be in a position where the Republican nominee for president is banned from these different platforms?
You can't have that.
That seems completely insane.
No, you can't have that. I mean, and look, like I said, I don't think Trump should be. I think Trump was a terrible president, and overall will probably be remembered as largely a failure. However, that doesn't mean that it's up to me. It's up to the American people, and it's certainly not up to Mark Zuckerberg. I gave you my opinion. You know, I'm just sharing it, but I'm just one of 330 million, and I think that people need to be a lot more humble whenever it comes to actual questions fundamental to democracy.